Star Wars Universe podcast. Today we are talking about Mandalorian Season 1, Episode 3, The Sin. I'm Matthew, I'm one of your hosts.
And I'm Jeff Randall, the other host.
Jeff, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic, sir. I'm getting to talk about a phenomenal program tonight. So it's always a good time when we're talking Mandalorian.
Yeah, I will say also, this is a sign of how much I love Mandalorian right now. I finished a big project for work yesterday, so today was my kind of goof off and just catch up on all my media shit today. So I watched the last episode of Picard. I finished Watchmen, the TV show, finally. And I just literally walked in the door 10 minutes ago after seeing Birds of Prey. All great things, but honestly, all throughout that, all day long, I was thinking about like, okay, when we talk about Mandalorian, this is what I want to talk about tonight. Because the show is so good, and I think this episode is, there's just so much here. You know, this episode I feel like this is really where Act 1 ends, and we start to kick it into something totally new.
Yes, absolutely. When I rewatched it while I was waiting for you, just because it had been a minute since I had seen it, and I really just wanted to watch it again. And I remember thinking the whole time that this episode was going on, the first time I watched it was like, oh man, this is his moment. You know, this is his, like, if you watch Deadpool, 4 or 5 moments. Like, this is his first one.
Yeah, it's very true. I have this is the episode that I refer to as the Mandalorian Josey Wales. I don't know if I've never seen the movie The Outlaw Josey Wales, but in the movie The Rounders, which is a big Rounders, which is a big favorite of mine. They talk about how, you know, the outlaw Josey Wales, he always rides back for a friend, you know, and apparently there's a big scene in that movie where he like rides out, but then turns around and has to go back and rescue people. And that's what I kept thinking about in this movie, you know, like in this episode. From the moment the Mandalorian walks in with the baby, I don't think I had any doubt in my mind that the episode was going to end with him coming back in there to rescue the child. Is that kind of where you were as well?
You know, honestly, I was thinking that he wouldn't even, like, he was going to go nuts at the point of drop off. Just be like, you know what? I can't let you have the kid, and then just start shooting. But they went so far as to have him go get fresh armor.
Yeah.
Go get more jobs and be like, no, I gotta go back for him. Like, he could already easily be dead at this point, but now you're going back for him.
So just to catch up for people who aren't watching again, can you do a quick recap of this episode, or you want me to do it?
Sure, I got it, yeah. So, this one opens, after, in the second episode, he finally gets his ship put back together after facing down the Mudhorn, and dealing with the Jawas. They go back to the planet that he had been on that seemed like Tatooine, but it's not Tatooine, but it's kind of Tatooine.
It's definitely Tatooine-ish. It has that Outer Rim, Old West desert kind of feel to it.
Yeah. So he goes back to his, outlaw town where everybody is in the guild and, goes to turn in his prize. But before he gets there, we have a nice little moment with him and the kid in the cockpit, and him, the kid takes his, the kind of the shifter knob, so to speak, off of one of his control pieces. And he's like, no, that's not a toy. And like takes it away, puts it back on the dashboard and like picks him up by the scruff and puts him back in his little space stroller. And then he moves on to turning the child turning the child into the client, played by Werner Herzog masterfully. And we see that the child looks at them and has just distrust written all over his puppet face. And they, cart him off. He, the Mandalorian is paid, and handsomely, I might add, a significant amount of Beskar. We already saw how much, 1 or 2 pieces, right? It was one
bar
piece.
of it can make one whole piece of the armor, so.
Yeah, 1 bar of it can make one at least pauldron and then sponsor many foundlings, from what they said. The excess will sponsor many foundlings.
Right.
So we see a huge bounty given to him. He takes it back, and then we finally actually see real interaction between all of these people who are following the ways of Mandalore. We get to see their interaction with each other and how they can have a knockdown, drag out kind of vibroblade fight right in the middle of the armory or the forge, and nobody really bats an eye.
Yeah.
They just have a casual conversation to end it. So we really get an idea of their culture and how they have been pushed into hiding. And then from there, he gets another job from Grief Kargas and finds out that everybody there had a tracking fob. He goes off to start his other job, decides that maybe I need to go save that kid. I'm too good a person to let bad things happen to good people or even to innocent people, good or bad or whatever. And then he goes back and we get one of the best, incursion scenes in action, in action set piece cinema, where he lures out some stormtroopers, blows a hole in one of the walls, lures out more, and just goes nuts on these guys, and eventually exfiltrates the child, gets out to a kind of the main thoroughfare of the town, that kind of showdown space.
Yep.
So to speak. High noon kind of space, and then has a massive shootout with everybody, and right when it looks like it's going to be at its worst, it's turning bad. In come all of the Mandalorians, just blasting everything to hell. Everyone's getting shot. There's laser blasts going everywhere, not a lightsaber to be seen. And he eventually gets on the ship, shoots Grief Kargas in the Beskar chest, because everybody has a shield or a book or something to stop a shot to the heart when the plot requires that they need to stay around for a while, but they still need to be shot because you don't like them. So shoots Grief Kargas off of his ship, closes the ship up, and takes off and gets a salute from one of the jetpack Mandalorians on his way out, saying, "I gotta get me one of those." Yeah.
No, it's funny because, when you go all the way back to the original Mandalorian, Boba Fett, one of the things that I always thought was really iconic about him was that jetpack. And it was interesting to me to start by seeing the Mandalorian without the jetpack. And so seeing more of them have it and hearing that he's he just doesn't have one yet, but he's still pretty badass. I was like, okay, I see more of how this fits. To me, I think that's one of my favorite parts of this episode is that we just get so much more of Mandalorian culture.
Absolutely. That's the main draw, the whole intrigue behind him. We got in the last episode, we got, weapons are my religion. And we were like,
right.
Your religion? That's a religion? And then we kind of expand on that now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even just the phrase you said, the people who follow the way of Mandalore, this is the first time we hear that phrase. I know a little bit about that background from having read some of the books and seen some of the Clone Wars, but although this is actually a little different than the Clone Wars, but I think it would have been very easy to be watching the show up to this point and think a Mandalorian is someone from the planet Mandalore. This is like a race or a group, at least a group of colonizers on a planet or something.
Yep.
And so, hearing that this is a community built more around a religion and an idea, and we're going to learn more about that later and where that fills in, and we'll hold off on that to the spoiler section. But I really liked that. I liked seeing, hearing that, whatever had, we knew a little bit about this purge and that something bad had happened with the Empire, but hearing that, this metal, Beskar, is, sacred to these folks, and hearing that their feelings about the Empire are so strong that they're willing to, turn their backs on Beskar if it's Imperial stamped. To me, that's a really powerful statement of just how deep the hatred of the Empire runs.
Yeah, it really is. It informs us so much more of just how hated the Empire is. But, out here on these outer rim, not core planets, you can't really do anything about it.
Yeah.
I mean, Grief Kargas even says, if you don't like it, that they're, these warlords are still out here. And that's one of the things that he called it. He was like, there's just warlords and, I think he said something else, but warlords was the thing that stuck. He was like, if you don't like it, go to the core planets and report to the New Republic. And then, and the Mandalorian says, that's a joke. So it really kind of, shines that light on just how remote these guys are and how little the Republic can actually do for them.
And that's, I think, it really for me underlines the fact of this being a Western in a powerful way, because I haven't seen a ton, but I'm interested in Westerns as kind of a cultural and historical motif. And one thing I know is that you don't get this as much in the modern ones, but especially in the early ones, and this is the historical truth, a lot of the cowboys that we think of, like the people in the Old West, that was in the years of like the 1870s, the 1880s. These are the years right after the American Civil War. And you had a lot of former soldiers who had basically like fought in this terrible war on both sides, and then kind of said, look, I can't deal with this kind of civilized life anymore. I need to just go out into the open and see what I can find. Firefly does that exact same theme. The people after the war who can't go back to civilized life. And so I just that one, all he has to say is like just the scoffing of, the Republic is a joke. That tells me so much, both about where we are right now in the history of like what happens after Return of the Jedi, but also about the Mandalore himself.
Yep. And about where we physically are watching this happen. It's, so far remote.
Definitely.
And the one of the things that I found awesome on the rewatch is, you really pick up the idea of like these guys are more like Ronin than anything. They have their their code of honor, and he says that he cannot take the sigil of the Mudhorn because it was not a noble kill.
Yeah.
Because
he basically had to rely on the child.
Yeah, he said an enemy helped me do it. And they you could see the curious face on the helmet of the armorer. She kind of tilted her head a little bit like, what do you mean an enemy helped you? Like, why would they do that? Well, he didn't know he was my enemy. And it was that it's a weird story. If you've got time, we can talk about it. But really, you just need to make some armor, please.
Yeah. That one line of he didn't know he's an enemy. I mean, that line really hit me hard because, again, we don't know much yet, but you sort of get the feeling of if this is a religion based on weapons and war and being bounty hunters and fighting. To me, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I feel like he was my enemy. That's a kind of a definitive delineated place in Mandalorian culture of here's how you're supposed to treat an enemy. And that has very specific rules and traditions to it. And the way he both wants to assign the child the rank of the enemy because, he turns the child into someone who's going to do it harm, but also that line of he didn't know he's my enemy. It's never explicitly said, but that to me, that also feels like such an act of not honor. I think about Malcolm Reynolds in Firefly saying, if I ever shoot you, you'll be aware of it. You'll be armed. You'll be standing in front of me. You will know that you're my enemy.
Yep.
And that's kind of what I flash to is that I feel like there's some kind of weird shame of acknowledging that someone didn't know they were your enemy,
Yeah. I could. Oh man. Oh, that puts so much more emotional weight on it.
Right.
Oh man. And then he has to go back because this child is innocent. He's 50 some odd years old, but it's still a child. It's still a very much a baby.
Yeah,
and
it's an innocent.
Yeah, it's an innocent bystander in this whole thing. And these Empire knockoffs, whatever, the warlord has turned this child into a MacGuffin. Are you kidding me? You can't let a child be a MacGuffin. I'm going to go shoot all the stormtroopers.
Well, and I love, you kind of mentioned that in one of the first scenes, there's this cute little moment of him realizing that, the child has unscrewed the top of his, gear shift lever.
Yeah.
And, of course, the moment that really gets him at that final scene where he decides to come back is reaching over to that lever and seeing that the top of it is still unscrewed.
Yep.
That hit me hard because that was such, I thought, a powerful way of, and again, the actor is so expressive without us ever seeing his face.
Without his face.
I knew exactly what was happening in his head.
Yep.
Of just and I knew that moment was going to happen. I mean, it was really Chekhov's gear shift that was established for us. You knew that was going to happen, but still that moment Oof, that was a gut punch.
And then they had the like super sweet moment at the end of it where he unscrewed it himself and dropped it in the kid's hand. Because the kid was reaching for it. He was reaching for it. Like, you can see his little 3-fingered hand just like, it's so far away. And he's just like, here you go, buddy. Like, oh my God, he does have a heart somewhere in there under all that Beskar.
Yeah, and that'll get a lot to, like, why... We'll talk more about why he does this in the spoiler section, because it's certainly gone into more in later episodes. But that moment was really powerful.
I was just going to mention, when he got the Beskar and... took it back to the armorer. When she was forging it, when she was making this cuirass for him, he had his flashbacks again, and we got so much more of what went down in the time, excuse me, in the time before he was a follower of Mandalore, and we saw like the battle droids walking up and being so hulking and imposing and scary. Like, we understand why now. In the first episode he was like, no droids.
This is kind of an aside, but it's in the other half of the Star Wars Universe podcast, we're doing a rewatch of the Clone Wars TV show, which I hope I think you're going to watch at some point. I'll really be curious to hear your thoughts on it. But in that show, very much like in the prequel movies, the battle droids are 100% comedic relief. Like, they are silly, they pratfall, they're ridiculous. They're never scary in any way, shape, or form. And in the flashback scenes, you only see like flashes. So for a moment, it just looks like this like imposing thing, and you don't realize it. And then I think it's only by like the 4th or 5th flashback that you realize it's one of those like destroyer drones that like walks around and has like a gun, built into its arm. And it's something that you're so used to seeing in like comedic ways, and here looks freaking terrifying.
It really does.
Yeah.
I love that they were able to turn this thing that, if you remember from the Phantom Menace, episode 1. If you remember from the Phantom Menace, these guys were like really goofy robots, like saying to each other, Roger, Roger. And then like, just kind of walking around in a robotic way, but because they're robots. But these droids weren't really anything other than like, there's a lot of them. Yeah. And in here, it's like, this is through the eyes of a child. So everything is much bigger as a child. And especially these guys, like, if everybody around you is unarmed, then even the most comedic things with a gun are going to be the best armed and most scary things. Right.
And when you've got the idea of like just a robotic, killing machine that has no mercy, no emotions. I mean, that's straight up Terminator stuff, And I just love that this movie got into that. Another direction I wanted to go in, and here again, it's kind of, I think this was a callback to the original movies, especially to New Hope, and maybe I'm wrong, and it's just sort of because it's a trope I'm seeing this, but I felt like we were getting the end of A New Hope, but this time from Han Solo's perspective. Because, in that movie, like, we see Han Solo fly off, and that Luke has to do this on his own. And if you've seen movies before, you probably know on some level that Han will probably come back, but they take you far enough into the battle that you can kind of forget, especially if you're a kid watching. And then Han comes out of nowhere, and it's incredibly dramatic storytelling. But there's a part of me that always wondered, like, what was Han's gear shift moment? What was the moment that made him go, I need to turn around? Was it just, damn it, I want that money? Or was it, Princess Leia looked real cute? Or was it Chewbacca, screaming at him about, how they're supposed to be fighters for justice?
That's like, what it was.
It probably was a lot of that. Let's be honest. But like, so I feel like this was that same story, but this time we got it to see it from the Han character's perspective, like getting to see him, doing much worse than Han ever did, turning the child over to the Empire, walking away, like you said, going back to get his armor, and then only later having that moment of like, no, I can't allow this.
Yeah. No, I was going to say that this is much more along the lines of, and I've been saying it over and over again, but this is much more along the lines of Punisher than it is anything else as far as hero tales, because Punisher goes a lot darker than pretty much anything else that we've seen as far as hero stuff, and he still ends up being the good guy in in that he doesn't want bad things to happen to innocent people, but will do like really bad stuff to the bad people.
Uh-huh.
And so, you know, it sometimes it takes Punisher a minute to come around. You know, he's got to tie up the innocent girl who was trying to steal something from him to feed herself or whatever. He's got to like tie her up in the back of his van and listen to her screaming for a little bit to be like, okay, like what's your story?
Yeah.
You go through a couple of hours of dealing with that before actually being the hero for her.
And I very much get where you're coming from. I don't quite make that connection because for me, somewhat in season 1, but especially in season 2, Frank Castle stopped being a hero. Like I was not able to see him as heroic after what he did. And I feel like The Mandalorian has not gotten to that point yet. But certainly like I can imagine that if The Mandalorian and Captain America and Daredevil rode into battle, like Captain America and Daredevil would be like, dude, quit torturing our enemies. Like just fucking kill them, you know? Because I think you're right. He definitely has that Punisher mentality of, and I wonder if we're going to see more of this about the Mandalorians. And again, going back to that idea of like, who is the enemy? The Mandalorians strike me as the kind of people who very much have a, you know, you're either inside or you're out. And if you're inside, then you're part of the clan, you're part of the family, and
this is the way.
This is the way we will protect you, and that innocents are part of that. But if you're outside. Yeah. I ain't worried about your rights. I ain't worried about you keeping you alive. Like, you know, you're in my way. And if I have to close a door on you to cut you in half, I'm going to close a door on you and cut you in half. You know?
Oh my God. And then that reminds me, like he used the hook, the grappling hook or whatever, and pulled the guy into the door. He did a very similar thing in in his assault on the stormtroopers. He shot one of the stormtroopers in the back with that grappling hook and yanked him toward him and just like let him fall on his knife.
Yeah.
To take him out. He could have shot him with the blaster. He could have vaporized him. He could have done anything other than just let the guy fall on his knife.
It tells you something that we're now talking about vaporize as the more merciful option.
Right? It's quick and easy.
But it's so true.
Mostly painless.
Yeah, and like I think that's I feel like this is like, that's why I said it is such a good character growth episode, because we're just learning more about what he cares about, you know, and we learn that he does care about things, and that's good, but it's not the things we expect a hero to care about.
Right.
You know,
and it takes him a little longer to get there than we expect that it should happen.
Well, and especially because, like, okay, the first scene, we've got the people who are guarding the child, and we think they're, like, stealing the child and doing bad things. Cool. They deserve to die. Big mudhorn beast. It's kind of just guarding its egg, but fine. It's a big scary monster. Kill it. I'm with you. This episode,
it's not a person,
like,
so it's fine.
You know, kill the Empire people. They're Empire people. You know, they're Nazis, basically. Like, go ahead and kill them. But if we're supposed to think that a bounty hunter can be a hero in The Mandalorian, most of those bounty hunters who are now going after him at the end of the episode, they don't know there's a child involved. They just know that a guy broke a contract, and now by their code, like, they have to take him in. So it was a very interesting scene to me, because it was like, I didn't have a sense of, like, these were people in our hero's way, and I know why he had to fight them, but I surely didn't feel like these were evil people. They were just kind of doing the same stuff he does.
Yeah. And
that was grief, though, definitely, like, you know, he's in this really moral gray area that I find really interesting.
Yeah, he's got a lot going on. I'm kind of glad that the plot demanded that he have the Beskar on his chest and not get killed.
Yeah. No, definitely. He's one I want to see stick around. I'm trying to think of other big things from this episode before we go into kind of a spoiler section, although I think we're going to have a bunch to talk about there. Yeah, it's funny because in some ways, like, not much happens in this episode. Like, it's mostly set up for a fight, and then probably the second half of the episode, if you count, like, the Empire fight into the Bounty Hunter fight as one just big, long fight chase scene, it's really half a fight episode.
Yeah.
You know,
it's just a big battle episode. It's part of the reason why I love it so much.
Oh, I was going to say, I think that, to me, I thought one other nice touch was that the Mandalorian who is most kind of in charge of helping him out, but was kind of leading the group helping him out, I don't think they ever call him this in the show itself, but in the subtitles, his name is given as heavy infantry, which I think is interesting because, again, it's delineating like that there's different kind of military roles, and maybe not all Mandalorians are bounty hunters. But I like that it's the guy who was fighting him and kind of getting on his case. He's the one who's most leading them now. And
this is the way.
Yeah, and when Mando says, like, hey, listen, you're going to maybe be, like, exposing your own base, you're hurting all of yourself, it's just like, no, this is the way. This is what we do.
Yeah. Yeah, we stick up for our own. Like, God, that's so... I'm getting chills thinking about it right now. Yeah. I'm getting so excited. That's what I'm saying, like, where this is kind of like, these guys are just Ronin out there. You know, they've got their code of honor, and they look out for each other. You know, they don't have an empire or a daimyo to fight for, or, you know, whatever the case may be, but they still stick to their Bushido. You know, they have their way. This is the way. And the fact that trumps any personal feelings between them just shows how honorable they are. And it gets me excited.
Well, and I am wondering how much that those references to like samurai and Bushido and Ronin culture, which I know less about than you do, but I think that was probably somewhat intentional by the authors, because a lot of people have drawn some really interesting parallels. The Japanese filmmaker Kurosawa, probably most famously, but a number of others have really talked a lot about how the American cowboy and the Japanese samurai Ronin shared a lot in common in a lot of ways, and that both held kind of a very similar role in society of being like the not law in a place of lawlessness, but justice in a place of, you know, unjustness. So I want commentary tracks, man, because I really want to hear like what was going into how they wrote this, because it's just it's funny, for a half-hour show, there's just so much we can unpack.
Yeah, there's so many layers to it. I mean, when he was getting his armor, and the armorer said to him, "This will make a full cuirass, which should be good for your station." I was like, "What do you mean his station?"
Yeah,
like what? He hasn't come up the ranks in the Mandalores yet? Tell me about the ranks. What's needed? What are the requirements at each rank? I need to know everything, and when he achieved them in the past.
And it's funny too, because like I made a joke in the last episode about it feeling like a side quest in a video game, role playing game. This felt like you go back to the town to like get your new quests and, you know, have your armor and like talk to your trainer who can level you up. Like it just felt it's so much of that feeling to it.
You've unlocked whistling birds.
Yeah. Which again, like, you know, it was funny. I was thinking a lot about Chekhov, because also I had that moment of like, okay, this is Chekhov's whistling birds. Like, of course he's going to use them in this episode, you know?
Oh, yes. I mean, when the moment that they surround him with just 4 stormtroopers, where like they come out of one door in single file, I'm like, dude, you could have shot both of those guys coming through like immediately, and it would not have been a thing. But I understand you got to use your new toy. I get it.
You know, sometimes you just got to like wait for the perfect setup, you know? I get that from video games. Anything else you want to touch on before we go into the spoiler section?
I don't know that there's anything that I can touch on without getting too spoilery.
This episode sets up so much. So for anybody who has not yet seen beyond episode 3, this is when we're going to suggest maybe you want to turn it off. Jeff,
go watch the rest of it.
Yeah, exactly. We're now going to start talking about what we think of this episode in light of all the things that we learned from later episodes. So if you're checking out now, thank you again for being a fan and for listening. Please remember this podcast is part of the larger Stranded Panda podcast network. A lot of great other podcasts, including some that Jeff is on and some that I'm on, and some others by friends of and colleagues of ours, that really kind of take what we're doing here of going deep on the Star Wars universe and go deep on almost every other one. The Star Trek, Marvel, DC, Watchmen. I know, Jeff, you and Matt are now doing a kind of rewatch of the X-Men movies to get ready for the new X-Men movie. Lots of great stuff. Check it out, Stranded Panda. If you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Facebook or on Twitter. All that stuff is on our going to be in the show notes for this. So with that, spoiler warning in 3, 2, 1.
This is the way.
This is the way. And the way is...
It's not a spoiler, but man. The way is that foundlings are part of your culture, but then they're part of your tribe, and you got to go save your tribe.
Yeah, to me, like that's the thing. It's really interesting to go back and watch this episode because all that stuff you and I just said about how like Mando saves the kid because he's developed this emotional attachment. I think that's true, but I think I think
it's part of the code too.
Yeah, he sees the little baby as a foundling. And looking at, to me, it made the scene where he deals with the Mandalorians so much more powerful because now I understood the shame when he says like an enemy who is not my enemy, you know? And I think that scene is probably as important to why he goes back as the gear shift handle, you know, and just because it really hits home for him, like you're part of a culture where, you know, your parents died, you were in an attack, and you got rescued, and you were a foundling, and now you just gave up another potential foundling, like, to its enemy. You know, you can't. That's not the way.
Oh yeah, and he even mentions specifically when they're when the armorer is like laying out all the Beskar, he's like, you know, keep the excess for the foundlings, and she says, "As is the way."
Yeah,
like. Of course we're going to do that because this is the way. And he's sitting there like, oh, you're right. Oh, shit, you're right. Oh, man, I got to go back.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some guilt happening there. And it just makes it more powerful. And I really like shows where you learn things in later episodes that, well, I'll say the opposite is, I hate watching a show where it becomes clear to me that when they wrote a question that they set up in one episode, they didn't yet know the answer to it, you know? And this, to me, it really let me know, like, they knew exactly where they were going with his story when they wrote this episode.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Jon Favreau was the creator of the series, and he was credited as being the writer for this episode. So, you know, as far as like having that unified vision that everything needs to really be cohesive, he was the man for it. And honestly, after watching him kick off the MCU, I'm on board. Yeah. Like anything Jon Favreau does, I'm like, yes, please, I'll have that.
And I really hope that we start to get like, not, you know, the movies have been kind of hit or miss, although I think the, you know, Rogue One was fantastic. I didn't like Solo very much. But so I don't think we're going to get like a Star Wars version of the MCU on screen. But if we can wind up having like the equivalent of Netflix on Marvel Netflix as like, you know, Disney Star Wars, and we get like a whole universe of other shows that don't, I know you're going crazy. You're like, but how good would that be? And like, this is what they're planting seeds for, you know? Like, what if, okay, I'm a politics junkie, but I want the like politics procedural show set on Coruscant during the same time, you know? And maybe they're like hearing rumors of a Yoda child out there. And so we know that like it's connected, but like it's just all the political machinations of trying to put a republic back together, you know? Or maybe even a show about like how we get to the, you know, the First Order. Like I just, to have a whole series of episodes of shows like that are all in an interconnected world and maybe characters pop in and out, but, you know, is all telling this larger Star Wars story without any Jedi in it, without any Skywalkers or Palpatines, like just talking about folks on the ground level. And with, you know, Disney's not going to pull the plug on its own shows like it did to Netflix, which I'm not bitter about. No, not in the slightest. But yeah, I just think there's yeah, I don't want to get my hopes too high up, but especially with Favreau at the helm, that's something I think I'd love to see.
Yeah, he is I would say he's a visionary director and creator. Like this man knows what's up. And, you know, the other EP, being Dave Filoni, who I've heard great things about from the Clone Wars and Rebels, you know, they've got it. They understand the heart of Star Wars. And, you know, this is like we've kept on saying, not a lightsaber to be seen. It doesn't have to be Skywalker and lightsabers and Jedi to be Star Wars and be good. Yeah. This show is a prime example of that. And Like you said, a procedural on Coruscant, trying to rebuild the Republic and trying to figure out the government after they took down the Emperor. Like we talked about that on the last episode that we were on, where that would have been a great kind of interim kind of thing, and seeing that kind of all fall apart as people are trying to put it together, and the First Order coming about because of that would be so great, but we didn't get that.
Yeah, it's the frustration, but on the positive note, I didn't realize that the person who was so involved in Clone Wars and Rebels was involved in this, and that, to me, that makes it all the better, because the person who really was very involved in, making the animated version of the Roger pratfall, like it feels to me like it is the continuity, that this is a much darker story. This is much more Rogue One than it is New Hope. This is, there's moral grayness, and no one is black or white, good or evil. Well, there's some pretty clear evil, but no one is, black or white good. But that it's still, because like some stuff, like a lot of the new Star Trek stuff, like it's interesting, but it to me it doesn't feel like Star Trek. This is such a different tone and such a different motif. But you're right, it feels like Star Trek. Oh my God, I keep mixing up those words. It feels like Star Wars to me, and that's just something I love.
That's a product of the soul that was put into it. Something can have lightsabers and not feel like Star Wars, or I said it right and thought I got it wrong. Come on, man.
This is what I'm doing here, yeah.
Yep, you're tearing me down.
Matt Carroll is somewhere laughing about all this.
Yeah, probably. But the amount of soul that the people working on it put into it, and the love that they have for it, it has that feel, and this is firmly rooted in Star Wars lore. This is going to be a linchpin that they're going to turn back to for guidance for every other property that is not a movie, and maybe even for the movies.
Yeah, and I'm so here for that. I think that's Mandalorian got when all these properties moved to move to Disney. I had a lot of nervousness, and the Disney Star Wars movies, some of them I think have been some of the best we've had. Some of them I was not impressed by. But when when they started doing TV shows, like I was pretty nervous, and I know I'm still pretty nervous about what the Marvel what the MCU. Yeah, with the Marvel Disney TV shows are going to be like. But if this is anything to go by, I think we're going to be pretty happy with the genre fiction that Disney is going to give us. That's not a sentence I thought I'd be saying. And again, a lot of chances for them to screw it up still. But if this is the kind of tone we get, I'm here for it.
Yeah, I am absolutely on board for this. And to soothe you a little bit about the MCU stuff, did you see the Super Bowl trailer, or the trailer during the Super Bowl for the Disney Plus series coming up?
No, I didn't. Is that WandaVision?
Oh, it's WandaVision, it's Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and it's Loki. All three were in that trailer. And Matt and I were recording an episode of just like news and feedback whenever that dropped online. And we got interrupted like mid-recording to be like, breaking news. Holy crap, you guys.
That's amazing.
And we watched it for the first time while recording there and flipped out. Oh my
wow.
God.
Yeah, I think somehow I missed that episode, but I'll have to go back and check it out. And yeah, so if this is where Disney's going, I still fear the mouse, and I'm still mad they, I really want them to give us the real Daredevil back. But we'll see what happens. So anyway, any last thoughts on this particular episode?
Let's see. Oh, there was a brief, like what I thought was a throwaway line that is indicative of bigger things. Whenever he was on the roof, looking through his, I guess it was the scope on his like multi-purpose weapon tool, pitchfork, tuning fork. And he was, honing in on the sound through the wall and also infrared. We heard the client say, that they want it, like they want it shipped out as soon as possible or something like that. basically saying that somebody higher than this guy is in charge of this whole thing and wants to expedite it now. So, that it felt like, it was a throwaway thing and, whoever wanted whatever, but then like the last episode happened and
we learned there is like someone out there. Yeah.
Yeah. It's all just coming together into this big tapestry. And I'm like, oh man, I see all these threads now. I see it.
That's great. Yeah. I didn't catch that at all, but you're right. That little thing means so much more.
Yeah.
I realized the other thing that I wanted to talk about is I want to talk about Grief for a second, the character, because he obviously goes through kind of a weird journey of like, is he on our side? Is he not? Is he just a mercenary? Does he have any heart at all? And by the end, he sort of seems like he's like not a horrible person. He kind of cares somewhat, although he's clearly out for himself. But the thing I thought was really interesting, and I never really thought about this until you and I went on this deep conversation about The Mandalorian, is the Mandalorian Code. Because at first I thought, oh, Grief just wants money. He's just got no morals whatsoever. But then I'm realizing, no, he has a code himself. And we don't really see this explored in season 1, but I wonder if we're going to see more of it in season 2. The Mandalorian is kind of at a weird crossroads because the Mandalorians have a code, but clearly the Bounty Hunters Guild has a code. And it seems like in this moment, he very clearly chooses the Mandalorian over the Bounty Hunter. But it's I would love to hear more about that Bounty Hunter code, because the more I thought about it, the more I realized, no, Reef is not such a bad guy as I might think here. I mean, it seems like what he's doing is terrible, but it's also he's not just saying oh, go kill kids for money. He's saying we have a code. It's his version of this is the way. And I hope we get that explored more, because I think that's a really interesting dimension.
Yeah, I want to see that explored more, and I want to see that come into contention with the way of Mandalore, and really and express the differences between them, and kind of have that kind of conflict between the two, and see the conflict played out on the reflection of that visor, because Pedro Pascal is so incredible at emoting without his face.
Yeah.
His body language is so great. And I think a lot of it also goes into the way that the directors capture the scene and the cinematography going into it. There's a lot that comes together, but it's a lot on all of these guys, and everybody involved has done such a phenomenal job.
It reminds me a lot, his acting performance especially, it reminds me a lot of Hugo Weaving in V for Vendetta. Who again, just emotes so well through that movie, through a completely unmoving mask, and there are points where I literally forgot he's wearing a mask because I can read his face so well, which is so weird. And I love what you're saying there, especially about wanting to know more about that, how our hero, our protagonist, fits in between the Mandalorian Code and the Bounty Hunter Guild Code. Especially because I don't think we haven't gotten this in the show yet. And this is from the novels that have now been declared to not be canon, so maybe this doesn't mean anything. But in the books that I'm reading now, which are all about a bunch of Clone War soldiers, and that they're getting trained by Mandalorians, and so they're talking a lot about Mandalorian culture. And apparently, from what I know, these books are fairly thought to be fairly foundational in helping to establish what we learn about Mandalorian culture. Jango Fett, the person who all the clones were cloned from, who was a mercenary and kind of went out and did his own thing, is really not respected in Mandalorian culture. He's thought of as having been a phenomenal warrior who basically betrayed the code to go out on his own and do his own thing. And, again, we start with Boba Fett and then Jango Fett. It makes you think maybe all Mandalorians are bounty hunters. But now I'm wondering if being a bounty hunter is kind of a black sheep profession, or it's maybe something you do because of the purge and we don't have our society, but it's kind of shameful now. I have no idea. I'm guessing in the dark, but I really hope that's something we see explored in season 2. What does it mean to be a Mandalorian who is also a bounty hunter? And is that what Mandalorians do, or is that kind of a shameful thing?
What's the work-life balance there?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, when the what was the heavy infantry guy, was messing with him in the forge, he called him a coward and tried to take his helmet off.
Oh, yeah.
Then that fight ensued, where they pulled out their knives and everything. But, like, why did he call him a coward?
Yeah. Why does he call him a coward? And you're right. Why? Like, clearly the significance of I've never taken my helmet off. No one has ever seen me with my helmet off. That is a very significant thing. And so, yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. But the significance of, as part of fighting, trying to take his helmet off. Like, that to me is a real way of saying, like, you're not a real Mandalorian.
Yeah, you don't belong here. I'm taking your helmet off myself.
Yeah.
And then he has to fight the guy to keep it on. Like, there's so much to this culture that we have to unpack, man.
I know. And it mostly, it just makes me feel like I can't wait for season 2 because, I mean, there's this post-spoiler section. Like, these aren't questions that are resolved in season 1.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we need like 3 or 4 more seasons, I think. Because, like, I want a whole season that's about learning about, like, the child and what the hell happened to him. I want a whole season that's all about the Mandalorians. Like, I have a lot of needs, Disney. I have a lot of needs.
I have a mighty need.
Exactly.
And all the helmets piled up in the covert. Because he said you're gonna have to move the covert, but then they didn't, and then what, man? Yeah. It's too much.
Stay calm. We got this.
Okay.
All right. I think now that we have whipped our audience into an emotional frenzy equal to our own, we can probably sign off. Jeff, again, thank you so much for being a part of this. To all our listeners, thank you. I talked before about how all the ways to find us. All that's in the show notes. We'd love to hear from you. Jeff, I know you and Matt got your podcast started because you love having these conversations with people. The Stranded Panda Network is all about, like, we want to have these conversations, and it's not just, people like Jeff and me and the other folks in the network. We could just buy each other beers and chat about this, if we're ever in the same part of the world. But we do this because we want to talk to you all as well. We want to hear from you. Tell us what you agree with. Tell us what you think was wrong. Tell us, what are your favorite moments of the episode? What really hits you? Email us, Facebook us, text us. I don't have a number, so tweet at us. Whatever you want to do, please find us. So on behalf of myself, and Jeff, and also my other co-hosts on the other side of this for the Clone War, Riki and Sarah. Hope you're tuning in to all those. Have a great day.
I have spoken.
Yes, you have.